So what I was saying about hold on to your kids, so just quickly, people fall victim to this type of situation, like this teenage girl who had this horrible, dreadful trick played on her. But really this only happens when our attachments to the people around us in our community and in our family are not strong. And that was the finding of Gordon Neufeld when, you know, he had a horrible job, and I mentioned this last week, but of going in to families where their teenage children have suicided and just finding out, investigating, finding out what's happened and what's been the cause of it. And, you know, he went in at first expecting that it was going to be child abuse and all these things. It wasn't that at all. It was always peer rejection. But this peer rejection would hit kids the hardest when they didn't have really solid attachments to their families or to their community. So the opposite of all of this sort of horror that we've brought up, because it really...
Sorry about that.
But it really is horror, these ideas, and that's, you know, we've looked forward to tackling them. I mean, if you really want to find the keys to hell, you know, start with the romantic part. And you're not going to... I mean, people had all sorts of problems of not regulating their anger and all sorts of other emotions before Romanticism came along, but it really does have a lot to answer for in terms of unleashing some very bad ideas on society. So, but on the other side of that, we want to talk about the positive side of it, of how we do build strong attachments, how we build strong attachments with our partner, with our kids, with our friends, with the people in the communities, for ourselves, for our own health, for our own well-being, and that if we do work on these ideas of attachment regularly, because they really are things that we need to practice regularly. They're not things that you do once. They're practices like prayer is a practice, or you know, sweeping the floor. They're things that need to be done over and over again. But if we can make these into habits in our life, really we will find that the people around us are not so maybe dreary and dull as we thought they were when we had our head out somewhere in fantasy.
And there's a lot, we touched on that your ego can get carried away, and get carried away with some attention you get for a little while when you do feel those emotions happening. So your ego can get out of control. But learning great attachment techniques and great connection techniques is a good way to really give your ego a good boost. I mean, in a healthy way, because we all know that ego is this thing we try and keep a cap on, but it's very real. And there's much worse things your ego can invest itself into than learning good attachment techniques, which is I think what we're about to move into now.
So, do you want to talk about some ideas with this first, or where do we start? There's a few of them.
Well, probably the most simple one is greeting, and I think we talked about that last week, and we were talking about that before the show started, Kim. And that is that when we meet someone, we walk in. Well, let's just do an example. You've just walked in from being out for a while. Hi, Kim.
Steve.
Where have you been?
It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Hey, and the song that we had on before too was a song called "Call My Name" by Prince, and it was actually funny because before we came in here, it's a great example of that example I've got just used then. Madonna's song "Like a Prayer." She says, "I hear you call my name, and it feels like home." Now that was one of the biggest songs ever, and it was for a reason, because that one simple line that she repeats over and over throughout the song is so true. When you hear someone call your name, when you hear someone say it warmly, it is like home. It's the best thing you could ever feel. It's a true connection. And it's something that you can't put value on and you can't sell on the stock exchange, but it's something that gives you so much power of influence, persuasion over the people around you, and so much connection with them.
It's the most powerful advice that we have to offer. But unfortunately, sometimes people don't realise just how powerful it is. I've had situations where people have come to me, Kim, my relationship's breaking down, I don't know what to do, I really don't want to lose my wife, I really don't want to lose my husband, what is it that I need to do? In situations where there hasn't been much time, this is always the first thing that I say. Greet them by name, greet them warmly by name. Every time that you get together, use their name and look in their face, and really by your tone of voice, show that you like them. And, you know, unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, people will say, oh, yeah, but no, really, what do I do? And it's like, well, you know, if that is the only one thing that you change and you do differently with your kids, with your partner, with your friends, just wait and see what an enormous effect that's going to have on your life and changing things. You know, and I think with teenage kids, the real trap is that, you know, often we're mad at them by the time they've come home. Because, you know, or with their partner, you know, because they've left their wet towel on the floor again and they didn't make the bed and they were late and all that stuff. And, you know, I mean, you don't have to have teenage kids to have probably experienced this, whether it's you had your mother or father do it to you, or, you know, wives or husbands. And it's really hard, you know, to change that pattern, because, you know, I certainly used to be terribly guilty of it. You know, arriving home, or people arriving in the house and just, you know, where have you been, blah, 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 blah. I know I grew up with it where it was so bad in my house to the point where I didn't want to come home, you know, and I really dreaded coming home, because if I was late, it was like I knew how bad it was going to be, and then it just got worse. And, you know, all I can say is that, you know, and this is the advice in this, you know, the great book I keep mentioning, Hold On to Your Kids. You know, whether it's your husband or your wife or your kids or your friends, greet people warmly when they come into your house. Greet people warmly when you arrive home. And this will have make a tremendous difference to your relationships. Put off talking about that stuff that they did that you do need to reprimand them about. You know, if they're your teenage kids, put off that thing that you need to talk to your husband or wife about that really has troubled you and bothered you about what they did, you know, leaving that dent in the car or whatever. Wait until you've Gordon Neufeld says, collected them, until you have a strong rapport built, until you have shown them that you're glad to see them and that you love them and that rapport is flowing, and you know, you can see that there's a connection and your relationship's strong. Then when you bring up the problem that needs discussing, you are going to have some leverage. They're probably going to be much more likely to listen to you. They're going to be much more likely to perhaps apologize and do something about it. And that can be really tough, because that's the times when it's the most important, is, you know, when you are angry or upset, still remembering that greeting, you know, really is everything and really is very important glue.